I have to tell you, of all the places I've been in the world, my brief time in India, and I still believe this, and I don't know how you feel about it, it is the most different culture I've ever been in. And I've been to a lot of places.
Yeah.
But when you're in India, and I said I was in Jaipur, and we were driving to a location, and we're going through sort of the heart of the city, and people, cars, livestock, everything is moving, but there was no formalized flow of traffic. Everything was moving in all directions. And I thought it was kind of beautiful. Yeah. I mean, if you surrendered to that, you're like, this is so completely different from anything I've experienced on the planet Earth before.
Yeah.
And the people are very beautiful. And but I remembered feeling completely outside my body.
The moment you land and then you're driving to the hotel, you're driving around animals on the street, and there's 6 people on a like a bike.
Yeah,
and it's amazing.
I think incredible. You guys go through 3 stages, right? Whenever my friends from abroad come over, it's because I recognize that it is sensory overload.
Yeah,
it is
total sensory overload.
More colors and people and flavors and everything that you've experienced in like a per capita basis, right? So they always come in, and my friends are always just kind of glazed over the eyes for the first 2 days because they've just never experienced so much in 48 hours. Then I meet them like a week later, and they're really homesick, right? They're just like, I miss peanut butter or some shit like that, right? And then, right? And then you meet them. Right?
I miss peanut butter.
Then you meet them a week later, and they're like, "I'm never going back." Right?
Yes.
And that's the arc.
You've got to make it past the peanut butter stage. I remember I put a lot of peanut butter in my baseball cap.
You did. You had me pack it.
And I kept taking my hat and going...
Yeah, I wasn't allowed to pack clothes because I had to pack all your peanut butter.
I've had comedians show up to comedy festivals with peanut butter in their suitcases. Like I had a female comedian from LA show up with like bread and peanut butter. And I'm like, we have 1 billion people. We're feeding each other, we and then she went on to eat every local thing that she could eat in like under 10 minutes.
Yeah.
But
it's interesting because we love doing travel shows, and I really wanted to go to India and do a whole travel show.
Yeah.
But and I would still like to do that. I remember the government was very much like, well, what are you going to do? Well, we go to all these different countries, and I don't want to diss the country. I want to go there and meet the people and make comedy with them. I don't want it to be making fun of them. And so, but I did notice that of all of the governments that we encountered, India felt, and I know that you've run up against this, they want a lot of assurances about what we're going to do while we're there. They'd like to see the footage. And I thought, I don't know, it was a different attitude than I had come across before. Do you know what that's about?
I remember when you guys were thinking about doing that because we were emailing, and then I mean, the version that I heard could be very, very different, but they said, we're gonna think about permissions because he shot something here before without permissions.
Yes. Yeah. Which was something that we didn't even think about, but years ago we did a piece. I mean, we're talking the old late night show.
Yeah.
We did a piece with a writer, Andy Blitz, and it was a really funny idea, which is he's having trouble with his computer. And so he unplugs it and he wraps the cord around it and goes to the airport, and then you see him. It's a very expensive piece. He flies to India, and then he walks through the streets and finds the actual place where the Collins Center is and brings the computer to the person, which we thought was a really clever idea. We were doing this, show by the seat of our pants. And of course, and I don't think it was insulting at all, but they just went and they didn't do the proper paperwork.
Yeah.
And apparently, so then we were, I think 15 or 20 years later saying, hey, we'd love to come and do something that we think is really respectful and fun about India. And they said, you didn't fill out the paperwork last time. And you need to be penalized. And at first we didn't know what they were talking about. And then, of course, we talked to Andy Blitz and he's like, oh yeah, I didn't fill out any papers.
Oh no.
Well, man, you
Who
can't
needs to do that? So yeah.
You can't expect us to fix your computers and then not have good memories. You know what I'm saying? Like we're going to remember shit, you know? Just saying, like, just once I want to see like an American call an Indian tech place and he'd be like, I need to fix my computer.
Yeah.
And just us be like, do you though? Like, do you really need a computer? What are you going to do on it?
Yeah, what are you going to do? Yeah.
No. And then just put the phone down on you. You don't need a computer.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you had found, you've very famously went up against it. It's hard to comprehend in American society because we pride ourselves on you can say whatever you want and people may not like it, but that is your right under the Constitution. And I know you've talked about this a lot, but so we don't have to dwell on it, but you gave a very intelligent and wonderful monologue about India and then flew there. And what happened?
Well, without saying too much, I was doing a show at the Kennedy Center and then I ended up making a YouTube video at the end of it, which was a monologue, and ended up just a very kind of improvised thing where my wife and I were in DC and we were looking at some monuments and I was homesick. And I kind of wrote this thing down at 4 p.m. before the show. And I showed it to my wife and I'm like, should I do this? And she's like, yeah, what could happen? And then...
And it's called Two Indias.
It's called Two Indias. And then we found a wedding photographer on Yelp who had a camera and we shot it and we put it up. And it really just began with like sort of one news channel. I think we all have the angry, on fire all the time news channel in every country. And so I put it up and it went viral for like 3 days, lots of love. And then a news channel picked it up and they kind of set everything on fire. And so on this channel, people were calling me on sorts of things and saying cancel his passport and filing complaints. And then when I landed, I was like, I don't know how this is going to go.
Where did you land? What city?
In Mumbai.
Mumbai, okay.
And then we just kind of buckled down for 2 months. You know, the theme of the new special is also sort of, if you can find a way to stay mentally strong through an outrage cycle, you'll discover that real life and love is on the way. And I think in moments like that, you discover what it means to be a comic in a certain sense, because you never think about sort of, if you really focus, you're not thinking about fair, unfair, any of these larger things. You're thinking, is this funny? Is there a joke that can be told about this or a story that can be told? You know, for context, I cannot wait to hear Chris Rock's 5 minutes about the Oscars.
Yeah.
You know, I've never heard him talk about it, tweet about it, post about it, because the rule of being a comic is the first time it happens, it's got to be jokes. You know, and so for me, it was feeling bad that I may have let a lot of people down and also received a lot of love and saying, can I write the joke that makes you both laugh? Because I take any feedback. Any feedback is good feedback and valid feedback. Head down, mouth shut. And so then I just kind of really dug deep to write a show about being an idiot at the center of the show. And I think 2 months later, after I turned my phone on and there's a lot of love and suddenly you're grappling, you know, it's a little surreal to not know where you stand in people's hearts.
Yeah.
And I wrote a joke which was, I was on the homepage of the BBC and there was a big headline that said, comedian polarizes the nation. Do you know how badly you have to fuck up before the British say that you divided India?
That's great.
Right? And so it acknowledges a fuck up. It acknowledges that it was polarizing and now both sides can hopefully laugh at it. And then I just wrote a show to kind of say, can I take some drama in my life and pivot it so it brings a lot of people joy, which I think is the comedian's job. So that's the learning for me this year, is what it means to be a comic, truly.
You know, it's interesting because I think it takes a lot of discipline, and I commend you for that, to go through an intense experience like that where a lot of people are upset and remember that your job is comedy. Because I do think many people would say, I want to go on the equivalent of Oprah and cry. It's something that I've, I bumped into Chris not too long ago, Chris Rock, and I was telling him I really commend you on not, everybody, Oprah and every show like that will do anything to get him to come on and open up and maybe tear up and cry. And it takes a lot of, I think, discipline and a kind of a class to say, I'm not going to do that. Yeah. I'm going to wait for my moment and then do what I do.
Because you want the end result of it to be joy, right? That is my job at the end of the day. And I wouldn't hand over my narrative to anybody else. I wouldn't trust anybody with my narrative but myself. As much as I know what, for instance, Prince Harry and Meghan Markle have gone through, I imagine there will now be a podcast about the book, about the interview, about the documentary. But a comedian doesn't have to go through that. We can just crack a joke and bring everybody to the table again. I think it's the most beautiful, democratic of professions in that sense. So yeah, that took a while. And you just kind of have to surround yourself with other comics. I remember I was at the Cellar, I think the night that I was on the news, and a comic came up to me and he was like, what the worst part is? They're calling you a poet. Ugh.
Right.
And that's such a comedian response where you, at some point you go, okay, this is going to be funny someday.
Yes.
And then you buckle down.
Did you, when you went back to India, were you arrested or was it just charged?
No, it was people filed complaints.
Filed complaints.
Yeah, and then the police was like, no, we're not, entertaining this.
And you never felt physically threatened?
No, I don't think there's a more powerful feeling than feeling like you've let people down.
Yes.
And so I think that's the most powerful feeling at the center of the special. One of the things that was important with the special is I never want to lionize myself or victimize myself.
Yeah.
This is just funny. I think we all know, the way that I look at it is I never even reference the content as such. To me, you can't predict when content becomes controversial, but you can make sure that controversy isn't your content, and you can kind of be the idiot always. So I think that's been the learning.